for Ben. Hello, y'all. I hope you're doing well. The kids and grandkids are doing well. Um, what is Jacob not going to hear? What is Jacob not going to like? Um, I'm going to be talking about, Hashiva Shoftenu, right? Bringing back our judges or counselors, the state of Israel, the establishment of the Sanhedrin, what ordination looks like. Maybe we'll get into that even. Oh, Yosef can't join. Um, we all miss out when you're not here because we get to learn a tremendous amount from you. So thank you. I hope you're feeling better, by the way, Yosef. I happen to be a little under the weather, but not like you. Um, the female ordination exam mess. Yes, there are I believe three female rabbis, or Jacob would like to call rabbits. I think rabbits. Ben, I hope you're doing well. That they went to the Supreme Court in Israel and said that there's discrimination. It can't be that we can't partake in taking these tests, specifically because the rabbinate, aside from it being a religious institution, it's also it's actually very relevant to what we're talking about over here. Maybe we'll come back around to it. The women's exam. But, well, I don't know if you're aware of this, Ben, but there are three women that just passed a portion of their rabbinical tests. And this is it's caused a brouhaha, as they say. And the rabbinate, not surprisingly, was very against this, but ultimately, the test went through, even though it was delayed. There was a lot of silly excuses. Anyways, I digress. Ben, are you doing all right?
Did they get better grades than the male rabbis? That's the question.
I think it's a pass fail.
I see.
Actually, it's not a pass fail, but well, at least I didn't see it. They didn't speak about any grades. No. Listen, it's I'm less worried about the result as long as it's lishma, meaning it's for the right purpose. It's for God's name.
Mm-hmm.
Then I believe good things will come from it. I believe it will be fruitful. What I believe though also that these women doing it should be also realistic and knowing that they're doing this for their grandchildren. This is not their win. I mean, it's their win, but like the expectation shouldn't be that like now everyone's just suddenly accepting this. And we'll get into this probably when we speak about this blessing. But first of all, you had a good Passover.
I did. Did we not talk?
Did we not? Oh, maybe we did. Maybe we did. I'm also under the weather, and
yeah, I know that last week.
Haven't slept well at all. I was just talking about this with my brother. Right after the stream, maybe I'll talk a little later. But either way, I'm trying to get an early night sleep tonight. However, I'm excited. I'm sorry we didn't learn last week, but last week was Yom HaZikaron / Yom HaTzmaut, right?
Mm-hmm.
The day of when we spoke about that as well with Jacob, and we had enough drama with that. So without further ado, let's do a quick recap of last week.
Yeah.
And then we'll move in and we will try to make sense of this week's blessing. Do you want to bring it up?
Yeah, let me just prepare it.
You froze, by the way.
I froze. Oh no, that's not good. Let's see what we got here. Am I still frozen?
No, you're not frozen anymore.
Amazing. Okay. Here we go.
Okay. Okay, the summary transcript. Geluyot, the ingathering of the exiles. Take it away.
Galuyot. So Galuyot. I just want to get also Ka b'shofar gadol lecharutenu. Okay. That's the blessing that we had. So the structural shift in the Amidah. The blessing marks a turning point. The Amidah moves from individual concern to national consciousness. The speaker is no longer I, but Am Yisrael as a whole. Redemption is framed as a collective historical transformation, not a private experience.
Right, I have these blessings that are specific to me, but here I'm not talking about like a much grander scale.
Mm-hmm. Redefining redemption, Geula. The text challenges vague spiritual notions and offers a precise definition. Redemption is freedom from subjugation. So Geula, right? For a nation, this means political independence and sovereignty. Based on Chazal, the difference in the Messianic era is self-rule versus foreign rule. I guess that is the all galut, right?
Yeah.
Galuyot. Key idea: redemption is not just spiritual; it is concrete, national, and political.
Right. There's one thing that we speak about, which is very nice for 2,000 years, to talk about, like, we all want to grow, and like there's like this inner tikkun olam that we're doing, but there's also very physical, practical, concrete, national, and people are scared with this word political, but maybe we'll get even into a little of that today as well. But Bookshot, go on.
Freedom versus liberty, chofesh versus cherut. A critical conceptual distinction. Chofesh, liberty, is external freedom, doing what one wants to do. Cherut, just true freedom, is inner alignment with one's essence or neshama.
Right, which means even if there's things I restrict myself, that's because I'm trying to find inner truth within me to be my real self and have that freedom, not just because I do whatever I want to do means I'm free.
Yeah. Chazal define true freedom as living in alignment with one's inner truth, Torah. I guess what is Torah referring to? It's like an inner truth is the Torah, or is it? I mean,
the Torah. The Torah allows you to find your inner truth, to align yourself to your inner truth.
That's what you align yourself with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. National implication. True redemption means not just independence, but becoming who the nation truly is. The role of the shofar, the great shofar, represents a call to awakening. The Rambam says, "Wake up from your sleep." Right. A process of spiritual activation, not passive waiting. There is a key tension here. Who blows the shofar, God or Israel? Resolution, in ultimate redemption, God and Israel act as one. By Tzadok. Conclusion, redemption is a partnership, not passive dependence.
I mean, obviously, again, this is just to be fair to Jacob, this is the conclusion I'm coming to, which is founded by sources and rabbis. However, others will come and say that there is a more passive role that we need to take because we need to be waiting, right? I disagree with that, obviously, vehemently.
Which one are you talking about? The Rav Kook here, the 3 levels of redemption, or what we just read?
No, what we just read.
Okay, 3 levels of redemption. This is from Rav Kook. The shofar symbolizes different motivations for return. There's the great shofar, the ideal.
Shofar Gadol.
Shofar Gadol, spiritual longing for God. This is the highest level. There's a medium shofar. This is national. The Benoni. What is this?
Yeah, Benoni, exactly.
Desire.
By the way, it does get into here. There's also like halacha implications what they're made out of. If it's made out of a ram, if it's made out of a thing, but I guess it was skipped.
So the medium shofar national is desire for normal national life. This is, we can map this to secular Zionism.
Correct. That's better to say. We can map it, right? This is Chazi's interpret others, but I'm representing this idea of it. Yes.
Right. Small shofar is forced. So you are being forced, right? It's driven by suffering and persecution.
Right. People being stabbed in Golders Green today in England, right? And them coming to Israel. That's not being blown by a great shofar. That's being pushed away by a very small and scary shofar.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The prayer asks for redemption, Geulah, driven by the highest spiritual motivation. Gathering the exile, kibbutz galuyot. So I think in the blessing, it talks about
nes velekabetz giluyotenu.
Right. Okay. The blessing includes a banner, nes, which creates unity and identity. Sorry.
Right. That's everything people congregate to.
Right. It is a call for physical return and national cohesion. There's an important distinction to make here. Galuyot, exiles, still connected.
Because they're aware that they're exiles, right?
Right. And nidachim, dispersed, which is another term that's used in the blessing, means lost and distant. So the process is gather the connected first, and then restore the lost. Unity as a central goal. The phrase "v'kibatznu yachad," emphasizing, which means and we gather together, emphasizes the need for collective, unified return, and avoiding cultural fragmentation and conflict.
Right. We spoke about how, unfortunately, in Israel, because the Zionistic movement was like primarily secular, right, that caused for a certain narrative to be built already over here. And then, let's say, when more groups came, that created like a certain clash because it wasn't as ideally happening all at once. Now it's still fairly close together, but now when you see unfortunately, when the French, there was a very big attempt at a French aliyah, ascendants to Israel a few years ago, but did not go well for cultural reasons and things like that. A lot of them went back to France, but like there is like an example where like once there's a certain element already that's built over here that requires like a lot of tension. It doesn't require, it causes a lot of tension. Sorry.
Interesting. I mean, I'm from Netanya, so you can't tell me that the French aliyah didn't work well because everybody's French.
No, there was a very big French aliyah for sure. I'm just saying, when this new wave came again, like there was like it didn't go well.
It didn't. Some of them didn't last. Right. Okay.
Just testing to see if my mic's working.
It's working loud and clear.
Okay.
Judah and Ephraim.
Judah and Ephraim, a historical framework. The division represents two essential forces: Judah, spiritual. And Ephraim, who is a descendant of Joseph, national material strength. Is this?
This is in the context of it's. We don't see it over here, but we spoke about it. This is the context of the lost tribes, right? The 10 tribes of Israel, also the split within the nations of Israel, coming from Ephraim, from Yosef, and there's Judah as well. So that's the reference over here. Sorry, go ahead.
So right, Judah's spiritual strength, Ephraim national material strength. Failures, Ephraim. Are common failures. Ephraim loses the identity through assimilation, right? Because they're thinking about national. Judah lacks full national vitality.
By the way, go back thinking ultimately about Joseph, right? The archetype, right? Who ultimately is completely in the garb of the Egyptian, right? Like there's an attempt there for the universal move to make this happen, but it gets lost, right? It requires Moses to ultimately cover the Egyptian in sand, right? And that's to symbolize like that's not going to work from there, right? And even Joseph realizes and says, take my bones out of Egypt ultimately.
Mm-hmm. The modern parallel of that is the religious and secular camps in Israel. Or I don't know, in Israel, but religious versus secular in Israel. Ultimate goal is the synthesis of both dimensions. A final vision of redemption. The blessing envisions political sovereignty, spiritual authenticity, and national unity, as expressed in Ezekiel. There was supposed to be a quote here, maybe. The unification of Judah and Joseph, Ephraim, into one people.
Is that it?
That is it.
Yeah, it's talking about the verse of grafting them together into there's one stick they're putting into the staff. Okay. Any questions? And before we move on, Kirk, I hope you're doing well. Little Kirk?
No questions.
Okay. Are you doing well?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear. You'll excuse me if I cough.
Smile.
Okay.
Okay.
Take it away.
Here we go.
We just did Kabbalah Shofar, the ingathering of the exiles. Now we're moving on to justice.
Yeah, let me just my computer's all crazy.
It's okay.
Okay, justice. Do you want to read? I'll just read. השיבה שופטנו כבראשונה, ויועצינו כבתחילה, והסר ממנו יגון והנחה ומלוך עלינו אתה, אדוני, לבדיך בחסד וברחמים, וצדקנו במשפט.
ברוך אתה השם, מלך אוהב, צדקה ומשפט. Do you want to read it to us in English, Kirk?
No.
Okay. Ben, it's our first no for you.
Restore our judges as before and our counselors as at first. Remove sorrow and sighing from us and reign over us, you Adonai alone, with kindness and compassion, and make us righteous with justice. Blessed are you, Adonai, King, lover of righteousness and justice.
Okay, there's a lot of terms over here.
Yeah.
And the smicha thing got me thinking about if we were going to go into smicha as well, ordination. That might be interesting. It's also relevant for this as well. So we're not just asking for better courts. It's really, in this first place, right? We are really asking for the return of a divine justice ultimately to the people of Israel, to Eretz Israel, and we want the restoration of the Sanhedrin, right? That's the system that we're referring to over here, these judges that we have, and we want the reestablishment of that system where halacha governs life fully, and that might sound scary to people, but we'll talk it out, and ultimately Hashem, right? God's presence is experienced throughout the judgment itself, right? So this is what we're going to try to reflect in this blessing over here is to a state that used to exist, right? In the time of Moses, right? Where justice wasn't separate from the divine revelation, like when we were really experiencing this. And this is connecting to the blessing that we just read, right? That we were just talking about over here. They're on the same line over here, which is it's not independent, right? There's a sequence. Like we were talking about these principles already earlier. That justice, it can't be restored without having national sovereignty, right? There's no conversation about me talking about justice. Like, where am I doing this? Where am I making this justice over here? Right? I need to be independent, right? Even if there's a Jewish court, the system is still depending on foreign values ultimately. And the legal framework is being defined externally, right? It's not being defined by us, by Jews. Right, so that's why only after the ingathering of the exiles and I have political independence can I actually start talking about restoring authentic Torah justice. By the way, with our conversation with the Noahides, this is why, according to Rav Shirky, it has become even more relevant after the establishment of the state of Israel, because he sees that as a point of reference to Noahides for establishing courts of justice. Right, like when when there's a Noahide out there, right? Let's say we'll take Kirk, right? Where is he looking at? How is he partaking in creating courts of justice, right? But if he could now recognize the people of Israel coming back to their land, and he's seeing a system that's ideally will be done over there through authentic Torah justice, that's his reference points, the world's reference points ultimately, right? So really, for true justice, we require national independence. This is definitely what I truly believe in. And also, to me, it makes sense. Now, the problem with all legal systems when we're asking for the judges to come back is there's a structural problem with this, and we all know this. This is something I'm very aware of as my brief time in the legal world, right? It's impersonal. It's very technical. It's really indifferent. So, right, when a person comes to court, I was not dealing in court, but part of schooling and also part of my experience a little working as a lawyer was sometimes going to court, which was quite interesting. But ultimately, when a person goes to court, they are dealing with procedures and bureaucracy and documents, and it's very, very cold. And the ideal expectation would be both for the innocent and for the guilty. I would want them to feel that they encountered divine justice, right? But instead, really what they're encountering is the machine, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and this really reminds me of, I think I told you I was reading Kafka recently, Kafka's analysis of bureaucratic sort of reasoning in his writings.
Nachon. Kafka, he's fairly popular in Israel as well, of course. This is just a question about the states. I don't know if you would know this. Can you go into you probably can. You could just go into a courthouse, right?
I think so.
Have you ever done that?
You
guys also get called up for juries, right? Exactly. So you have juries. You guys get called up for them. So
yeah, but I'm saying I haven't personally.
I gotcha. Ben, have you ever been called up for jury duty?
No, not yet. But but in Israel, we don't have juries, no?
Nope.
No, right?
Wait, does Ben live in Israel?
No.
Oh, you're in America.
Yeah, but I grew up in Israel, so I know. I remember doing a tour in like the courthouses, but in Israel, are you saying that in Israel, and this is what I remember, that you can sit in cases?
Unless it's minors, different cases where it's closed doors, but yes, generally you could sit inside.
I don't know if the equivalent is true in the States. I would assume yes, but
yeah, I think so. But recently in Israel, there was a live stream of this court case with regards to Ben Gvir in the Supreme Court. And it was, I mean, there's embarrassments on many levels, but to see the Supreme Court, I don't know, it was very embarrassing. It's definitely not what we want, right? We have to think of Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's go back there for a second and think what Moses, the main man, right? What was his system, right? There's this famous scene with our boy Jethro, who Moses is judging alone, right? And Jethro comes in, his father-in-law comes in, he says, listen, dude, this is not going to work, right? He tells him this thing, Navol Tibol, right? You are going to welt. You can't handle this. And Moshe's response is, Ki yavo elai, right? Ha'am lidrosh et Elohim. They're going to come, Ki yavo elai lidrosh et Elohim. Yes, I'm almost positive that's what it is. And basically he's saying, it's not just conflict resolution that I'm doing for them right now. I'm actually teaching them Torah, right? I'm revealing Hashem to them. I'm transforming justice into a divine encounter to them. Like, Jethro, you don't understand. It's not that, yes, it's hard work, but this is sort of what they want to be experiencing. And that's really part of a deeper question that I think we could ask is, we're speaking about Egypt and Joseph. Moses is coming from Egypt, right? He is clearly growing in a very sophisticated place. He's a scribe. He knows how to write. So why is Moses not creating a system immediately? Why do you think, Kirk?
I don't know.
Right? Does it make sense that he would already understood some sort of governance, right? He knew hierarchy. He's going out there. He's dealing with these things. So I think, again, we could go back to what he's saying about meeting God, right? Which is before you could build a system, Moshe wants to establish this encounter with Hashem through mishpat, and this is really even the judges in the Torah are called Elohim, right? It's really teaching us that judgment is not supposed to be mechanical. It's ultimately supposed to be a like a revelatory moment, right? That you suddenly realize, and that's we have to realize what we're actually asking for. Hashiva shoftenu kabirishana. I'm not asking for better judges, or not just better judges, or just more like efficient courts, which we have a big problem in Israel, and I'm sure also in the States. I'm asking for the divine presence. I want it to return into the courtroom, and I want the justice to become alive and personal and Hashem centered, which ultimately. Sorry, go ahead, Kirk.
I was just going to say, are you saying that there couldn't be justice without God?
Not saying there can't be justice without God. I'm saying when we're asking to bring back our judges, we're not just saying I want better judges. I'm saying I want, and what I was saying Moses was doing is, as far as that's our model. Moses is coming saying that the reason Jethro, the reason I didn't build a system yet, or the reason, I mean, Jethro gives his advice, and then what Jacob likes to call the Jethro protocol, and then Moses takes it on. But it's not that Moses, you could say like this is the great Moses. He doesn't know that he needs a system like this. The idea is Moses is saying like, no, the impression has to be that this system is not what we encounter today in the legal system. Rather, it itself is supposed to be imbued with Hashem inside, right? Again, so the practical meaning of that would be, right, a Sanhedrin, like an authority of Torah law. Right, there's Lishkat HaGazit, the temple chamber of judgment, right? So this week we get into ordination over here a little. But 1 second, I want to just look at some notes over here. My bet is that Chedi will say the prayers point to political state, as a tradition around here. It's not I'm saying that. I'm just saying if there's a state, it does not even the state of Israel, any state, the state that Jacob wants to happen, it too will need to be political, of course. I believe the public can sit in the courtroom and watch trials unless there's a specific issue with the case, right? That's what we thought as well. Just leave your Swiss Army knife at home. Okay, he is trying to be a sole source of mishpat as God is one. But Yitro tells him man is not God. It is not good for him to be alone. That's also true, by the way. There's a whole nother level over here, which is Moses. It's not that when he tells Moses, just commenting about what Yosef is saying over here on a deeper level, when he tells Moses Navolti Bol, again, you could challenge that, like I'm flipping Moses, right? I'm not gonna welt anywhere. However, he's saying the concept of what you're trying to do, right? It can't be that their only understanding only comes from you. It has to be spread out as well. You can't just do this alone in that sense. Yehuda, I hope you are doing well, sir.
So basically, you can have justice without God, but the type of justice that you think Moses should establish is one that has divine authority.
The one we should establish, the one we need in the world, the one we need in Israel, the one that so let's go into ordination a little.
But
okay?
I was just going to ask.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, what about people who don't believe there is a God?
What about those dudes?
Well, if they would say that basically trying to establish a system of authority on something that doesn't exist doesn't make sense.
Right. So thank God, over half the population of the world already has bent the knee, and every tongue should swear, all like as it said in our Bible, and recognize the authority of God. And then you could throw in, that's also including like the Eastern religions as well. And then bring in all the people that have some other understanding of some spiritual connection. And as we move forward in our beautiful existence, these things will be clarified. Do not worry, Kirk.
Okay. I mean, I was just saying they might argue that they don't buy into the legitimacy of that.
It's Vadai, of course. They can also challenge this whole thing, that little funny hat on my head. Right? When I'm just saying, again, in this class specifically, we're talking about the prayers from our context, right? I'm not trying to prove why an atheist needs to pray right now.
Okay, so you would say that basically, yes, the kinds of court that Moses wanted to establish, that you're trying to establish as well, is one from God, but you don't have to, by the time you're in this class, you've already made that assumption.
Correct, but so we'll get into what it is actually we're looking for and how that also relates to sort of the legal systems we live in today. But again, smicha,
This is a prayer. This is a request. So if you're
correct. This is a
requesting
request.
something, you're assuming that you're motivated for it to be.
Well, this kind of accounts for itself with the minim. Shalom Aleichem. Sorry. Yeah, I'm butting in. But yeah, like when we get to the prayer about like the heretics, then that kind of accounts for it. Yes, of course, it assumes that you believe in, Torah Judaism as that's what these prayers are centering around. And there was a 19th prayer added later that we say against those who aren't. So yeah, that'll take care of itself later when we get there.
But even before the heretics, there's again, Kirk, we could go all the way back to God's image, and I could say Western law that we're dealing with, all is stemming ultimately from our own Jewish roots as well. So we're in the age of refinement. We are fortunate enough to be reading these texts and praying for these things because we want the veils to be lifted off of people's eyes. It doesn't mean that people are not doing some sort of justice today, and ignorantly or not, right, are paving the way for the Messiah and these times. So that's why I tell you, like, the Greta Thunberg energy is good. Ultimately, it just needs to be like reoriented. But again, let's go into ordination, how this works, because again, it's important to understand that when we're praying, what is it exactly we're asking for? We could just be saying these words, but these words have meaning and they have a context to them, right? We always go back to the people of the Great Assembly. The last of the prophets are putting this together, and they're condensing all their wisdom and prophetic understanding into these words, into these sequences. So when we're talking about smicha, ordination, right, the original OG is Moshe, right? He's ordaining the Sanhedrin, and teacher, student, all the way back to Moses. And the Rambam, Maimonides, the great eagle, right? He tells us that a judge has to have an unbroken smicha chain. Now we have a collapse in the system, right? Ultimately, it's being destroyed in the 5th century. Thetis II, he destroys smicha. Very intense stories about this in the Gemara as well, right? Now there's no valid smicha, there's no Sanhedrin anymore, and now we have this limited halachic authority. Again, this is like a quick recap. Everyone could look in if they want to and dig in a little more. Today, we have our rabbinical courts that are only really dealing with marriage and divorce and mamonot, monetary law. But they can't really deal with like national Torah law fully. Now, how could it be that smicha is going to be restored? The Rambam has this very radical proposal, right? He says, if all the rabbis of Israel agree on one authority, as if everyone could get together and agree on Mr. X, then Mr. X then could start granting smicha to other people, and he could restart the chain. Now, there's been attempts in the past. I'm sure Jacob has spoken about this, and maybe Yosef will know others that I'm not mentioning. But there's in Tzfat in the 1500s, and he ordained Rav Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, and there's the Ramak, other rabbis as well in that whole crew got smicha. And this is in the context of this Jewish state in Galilee that they wanted to try to pull off, maybe even rebuilding the temple. And they had even some, if I recall correctly, some support even from the Ottomans, but I could be wrong about that. But obviously this failed. There's a rabbi in Jerusalem that also challenged them and said that you didn't even go according to the Rambam's ruling because you didn't ask me and I'm part of the rabbis, and they had some response to him, but it's like a legalese. There's also later attempts with the students of the Gra and the early Zionist period. And again, there was an attempt, I think, in 2005 also for, David, are you with us? Are you on? Good, nice. I hope you're doing well, dude. So all these were unsuccessful. There was one to try to bring in, I think this is in 2005, to bring in, I'm blanking on the name, Steinsaltz, the Rabbi Steinsaltz. And he's a heavy hitter and was great, but unfortunately, this didn't work. Now, for our generation, right? And this connects back to our blessing. We have a double challenge over here because Torah scholars, ultimately, our rabbis, are, they need to be, we need to build great leaders. I need Torah scholars that have national leadership and universal moral decisions. They know how to really, figure those things out. And you could say that this is what YU or other schools are trying to do. And you also have to create unity between the rabbis, right? And between the different sectors of the nation of Israel. My joke to people is always like, give me your short list of who you would put on the Sanhedrin, right? Like I want to see where these names start gathering up, and then we could see where we're going with this. But obviously, if I don't have unity, because people have to remember this, authority depends on acceptance, right? And this is something that is built into our system, right? If the rabbis see that it's not working, then they could change that because it is true that we say Chacham Adif Min Avi. At some point after the destruction, the sage is preferable than the prophet. However, we're also told about ourselves that we are prophets, and if we're not prophets, we're the sons of prophets. As in, the collective of Israel also has its own energy that it can also work with the rabbis. Yes.
I have a question about that because,
Please,
it's very clear that in First Samuel in particular, First and Second Samuel, that David has to be he's declared king by God, he's declared king by the prophet and by the people, and same thing for Saul. It's not enough that God's chosen him. He also needs the people to say that guy. We choose that guy, right? So that it's all those levels. But I understood the prophet as being a completely different role. Because the prophet can come forward and the people utterly reject him. And he could be a persecuted character. And isn't this what Ben Yosef is? The Ephraim image is that the one who is rejected by the people, not accepted by them.
So, no, I mean, because we have prophets, obviously Moses is accepted, and we have other prophets, Deborah is accepted, and other prophets are accepted as well. They have their own challenges.
Oh, I'm not saying that they are never accepted, but do they have to be accepted by the people in the way the king is?
No, and definitely not. It's more than that. Sometimes the king himself rejects the prophet. This goes into a different, let me get back into the prophet in a moment, if you don't mind. I wanted to get back to just this thing about ordination for a second, though. We were talking about the people that there were different attempts to it, and ultimately, we have Rabbi Kook, who creates the chief rabbinate in Israel, which I would say is a far cry from what we want, but this is the beginning of this process. Why? Again, because it's rooted together with this national identity. Right, so this is a centralized Torah authority, and it's beginning to build a national halachic structure. I could pause over here and say that politically, right now where I am, I might want a separation of quote unquote church and state, or synagogue and state. But the ideal is that I want these things working together. But we're gonna get still to the prophets. But I want to go into, because this was all about understanding these first three words of Hashiva Shavtenu Kavushana. But then when we'd say V'yotzenu kebatchila, right? So who are these counselors, right? Now the counselors are referring to either the advisors of the kingdom, or in today's day and age, this is political leadership, right? This is who the advisors are, and this is sound? Someone joining, or was it just sound? Okay. So now, why does this come after Judges? Because again, there's a deliberate sequence over here. If I'm restoring Judges, which is mishpat, right? Justice, I also then want to restore the counselors, the governance itself. And the underlying principle would be justice is defining truth, and the politics are implementing that in reality, right? So I want a political system that doesn't block the access to God, and I want a state that doesn't become the substitute of God either. I don't want to confuse the state with God over here. So I want sorry, go ahead, Kirk.
I was just going to say, and this is the thing with the contradiction between Judaism and Marxism, is that we don't believe that what's fundamental is materialism or material economic or political forces. We believe what's fundamental is spiritual.
Yes, but you have to feed your child, right? So
yes, but that's not. But Marxism isn't the feed your child. Marxism is a philosophy that is based on materialism.
Correct. You're right that that's the focus, but I'm saying in Judaism also, again, through the material, I'm saying we elevate the material.
Yes, we're not Gnostics.
Correct. And that's why, again, so there's a tension also between this idea of justice and kingship, right? That even though I want political sovereignty, it's necessary. Still, without Torah justice, right? Kingship is incomplete. So to Jacob over here, this is my olive branch, right? It's not complete. It's the redemption is not complete. Israel is not what I want it to be yet, right? It is complete. It's still very much incomplete, right? But again, the perfection of justice enables a perfection of governance ultimately. And it's necessary to have these. There's two systems. I need the Mishpat Torah, right? I need the Torah law, and that is give me a revolution. That is the divine presence being revealed to me and a spiritual truth. And I also have the focus of it is to give me this absolute justice through the Torah. However, I also have the law of the state. I have the Din Malchut itself. And that is to give me social order and protecting society. And that's focus is really practical governance. Like, let's give a case. Okay. David sees a man chase another guy with a knife, and you see him run into a building. The guy runs after him. You hear screams. Then the guy that was running after the other guy walks out with a bloody knife, and then you go inside and you see this guy lying down on the floor, and he says, "That guy that you saw, he just stabbed me," right? According to the Torah, you can't convict this person because you need two witnesses and there was no formal warning, right? So that's a problem. Now, if this is extremely rare, then that would be tolerable. But if it's repeated, then obviously there would be a social collapse. And that's why I need both of these things, right? So the solution would be under kingship, right? There is Torah law, but under kingship, the king could punish the murderer. So that's why I need these two systems because they have the different purposes. The Torah and its courts are there to reveal, again, the divine presence. The state courts are there to maintain order ultimately. And this comes to your thing about the prophets. There's this acronym, which is the tabernacle in Hebrew called Mishkan, right? Which is Mem for Melech, Shin for Shofet, the judge, Kuf for Kohen, Nun for Navi, right? And the idea is that everyone has to have inside him that sort of system. But in general, in Israel, you have this separation of powers. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, well, this perfect system of justice is intertwined with the relationship with God. So there's multiple situations where you don't need any witness. So if a husband suspects that his wife has done something, she drinks the material that comes from the dust and everything, and then she becomes sick if she's guilty. So no witness whatsoever, merely God. Suspicion, but God enters into the process and justice still occurs. The person who steals the robe and whatnot in Joshua, there's no witness. The lot falls on him. He immediately confesses, right?
Ahan.
Yeah. In a different situation, the lot falls, like in our day, the lot would fall on someone and he would deny it. And how do we move forward, right? But if you think about it, they accept that the lot fell on him and he says, "I am guilty," right?
So you're touching on a very it's very deep what you're saying. I want to come back to that. I first want to answer your prophet thing though. The prophet thing is why I said this acronym is because we believe that you have a king, you have the clergy, you have the prophet. The prophet is more of the anarchist, right? You have the priest, which is, again, that's the clergy. Of the king, which is the monarchy, and you have the judge, which is that's the legal. You have all these different systems working together. And I would say this is really what true theocracy is, like how Josephus describes it, right? This is like that God is ultimate authority, right? In every system, God is expressed through multiple different societal institutions. But this is relating to what you said right now about people accepting this reality onto themselves, right? So like today in Israel, right, the legal system doesn't have this standing of din malchut, right? There's no formal recognition of the Torah laws and its legal foundation, and there's and a rabbinical authority that's going to be binding, right? So the only thing that could change that would be the only thing that could change that in Israel, in my estimation, would be that the Torah laws become the legal foundation of the state, and then rabbinical leadership endorses like an alternative court system. Then the secular legal system could be redefined as din malchut, as in there's a whole system that we have today, crossing, jaywalking, and 1,001 different things. They all have secular status because that's the only system there. So there needs to be a rabbinical system that is bringing God into this world, into the system. And then that system recognizes the secular system itself as a legitimate state law that allows me then to deal with many other things. And this, again, this is very, very important to remember this, because this gets into the next point, which gets into ultimately what David was talking about, which is v'aser mimenu yagon v'anacha, right? Which is remove sorrow and sighing from us. Sighing also sounds always so depressing of people just sighing, but we have to remember the emotional state that exile put us in, right? And as long as judges are not restored and our counselors are not restored, then there is a sorrowing and there is a sighing. Now, Rambam famously says that prophecy disappeared because also prophecy requires simcha, joy. And it's really a precondition for revelation. So is being calm, by the way, and not being quick to anger. But obviously a person can't experience true joy when he's living under, as the way Maimonides says it in the guide, if you're living under like corrupt rules that don't make any sense, you can't have prophetic joy, right? If I'm living with a city that has ridiculous tariffs or countries that have ridiculous systems, then I'm constantly enthralled in that system, which is always subconsciously pressing on me and not allowing me actually to receive this joy that I want to be in, right? And being subjugated or spiritually suppressed, it doesn't allow me to do that. Now, when we're in exile, there's this loss of Torah and there's a loss of prophecy, right? There's a famous verse in Eicha. How do you say Eicha in English?
Lamentations?
No.
Yes, it is Lamentations. You are correct.
Eicha, no. Oh, I was thinking about
Well, that's what the book is called in
correct.
English. I don't know if it directly translates that way, but yeah.
I got you. but over there it talks about a loose translation into English, basically that there's no Torah and the prophets are also not getting visions anymore from Hashem. And the Talmud in Tractate Chagiga tells us also that there's no greater bitul Torah, there's no greater extinguishing of the Torah than the exile. Right. So again, there's a chain reaction over here. If I don't have any sovereignty, then I can't have a full Torah life. And if I don't have a Torah for life, I have no joy. And if I have no joy, then how am I going to have prophecy? And that's why, when we're asking for these judges and these counselors, there's a deep request. I'm asking for the restoration of justice and the restoration of leadership, so joy can ultimately return, so I could have prophecy again. And what kind of joy is this? This is not exile joy, right? Of like a reactive joy, just because I'm emerging from suffering, so I'm very happy. This is a true, complete joy, right? I don't have any sorrow. It's coming from within. I know it sounds like a little woo-woo, but we understand, I think some of us understand what a true joy is. If you have children, you could definitely understand what a true joy is. And again, this is a shift that I believe, as a rabid Zionist, that Jacob likes to say, that this is something that's already happening, that since the establishment of the state of Israel, there's been a major portion of the sorrow and sighing of exile has been removed.
I'm sorry if you said it before, but I mean, isn't this also connected to the temple? I mean, there's halakha that is because we don't have a temple, we can't do X, which maybe is referring to what you said, but like even play music, I think.
But this goes back to, first of all, you are correct, and we're in the Omer period as well right now, and there isn't music, and that's a longer conversation. However, going back to Maimonides, we don't know how the sequence is going to start, right? But again, a clear understanding of, and one of those one of the first prerequisites you would need to even start this conversation is having a land, being over here, having a conversation about these things. So again, like we said, we're still not there, but I very much believe we're in the beginning or not even in the beginning. We're deep into this process already. And now, okay, now this gets to this is going to get to ultimately to what you were saying with your deep comment, David. We say we end the blessing over here where it seems to be like a contradiction a little. Well, we don't end it. Umloch aleinu ata levatcha. Right? We just said, bring me my counselors, bring me my judges. And then I say, reign over us, you, Adonai, alone. Right? So I just asked for a whole entourage. And now I'm saying, also teach me yourself. Right? So this would seem like a contradiction. So how can both be true? Because we are looking to have these systems ultimately be transparent vessels, right? People get very scared of politics involved with religion, but if it's done properly, it's fantastic, I believe. And I believe that's what we're required to do. So again, the request is not that is a system that is ruling instead of God, right? But that through that system, God alone rules, right? So leadership doesn't block God. It is reflecting what God wants. Governance in that sense becomes a mirror and not a barrier or a veil. And when we say you alone, again, like from a linguistic point of view in Hebrew, the source is coming from Isaiah.
Well, and it's the image of the good king in Deuteronomy makes a hand copy book of the law
that he carries with him
for himself to study. And when we were talking about 2 Samuel, I do believe that the appearance of the Ark of the Covenant is supposed to look like God's throne, that it's a chair. And so for David to be dancing in front, like the most important element in a parade is the last thing. And David is not the last thing. David is saying, I am not the king. He is the king, right? Which is the exact opposite of the problem that entered them into kingship in the first place, where it says they haven't rejected you as king, they've rejected me as king, says Hashem, right? Like, so this image that the king actually is saying, I am not the king. Hashem
correct.
is
Hashem, the Torah is on my hand and with me all the time. Obviously, we also see this in the blessing of Shema, and we always have to have a God on my mind.
With the Torah having crowns, right? The scroll has crowns to it, right?
The letters themselves, yes, the letters themselves also have crowns. I'm going back to this idea of alone. Alone, in again linguistically in the Torah, means separation and connection, right? We have, man is not good by himself. Lo tov liot adam levado. We also have vater Yaakov levado, when Jacob was alone. One is saying man is incomplete, right? That's why he needs a union. And one is Jacob is alone, right, before the encounter with the angel. So again, this is like the paradox of alone. When we say Hashem alone, only you, Adonai, right? I want a removal of one layer, and I want another connection with another layer. Now, the question is, who is removed and who is being remained? And this relates also a little to God number one and God number two. In Psalms, it says, Ki shemesh umagen Hashem Elohim, right? So this is Hashem, right? The tetragrammaton, Hashem Havaya, is like the sun, right? This is like the direct divine reality, and Elohim is like a shield, right? This is more of like the meditated divine governance, and the role of the shield.
Sorry.
Yes, hit me.
Can you repeat what you said, like with the names and the?
Okay, so I was saying in the Pasuk in Tehillim, I'm referencing this Pasuk in Tehillim. We know this when we speak about this, about God number one and God number two, about there's the agentic and there's the arenic, right? So the arenic is the magen. The agentic, is the personality Hashem that I'm having interaction with, right? So when Moshe sees Hashem at the sneh, right, remove your sandals, he passes through him in the cleft of the rock. That is a very intense revelation. I'm seeing the sun, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. And for that, I need Elohim. I need a shield for that, right? So we need natural systems. I need a psychological filter. I need a structured reality, right? And these act as protective shields. So when I'm looking for also governance, right, I'm saying I need God, but God can't interact directly like that. I mean, in some cases he can, like we just said, when I have the Urim V'Tumim, when I have elements like that, like you were referencing, David, or with like but generally speaking, when I have a court system, I want it mirroring God, but also channeling, right? They're acting sort of as a filter in a certain sense. They're allowing this divine understanding to make its way ultimately through to us, right? It's necessary, but it's also short term, because ultimately even that is a barrier. And that's why we're praying that for in one day, even that shield will be removed, right? The ultimate aspiration is, like we said, that God will ultimately be himself. There's no concealment. There's no intermediaries. There's a direct relationship with God and humanity. We spoke about this earlier about, Am Yisrael, the Kuchabrichu are one ultimately. Now there's a danger there because this can happen prematurely, right? Direct divine encounter could overwhelm existence, could consume us, as we know with the story of the Pardes, as we know with Aaron's sons, right? If you're going to play with fire, you're going to get burnt. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just means you're playing with fire. And it could be a holy fire, and it could be that you're in a fantastic mindset afterwards. Nevertheless, you have been disconnected from us. And therefore,
it's not the only danger, though, right? I mean, it seems to me like another danger is to, when you see something like God and Israel is one, is also, or for any on the individual level, to confuse that with your ego being the God, right, defines everything. That's also the danger, right, of not recognizing what's above you and thinking that God lives within your intellect, right?
I would agree. I would agree. And again, the line of Israel Kuchabrichu, and sometimes it's added with the Torah are one. Those ideas that could, with all love and respect to David, could lead to potentially ideas of the Trinity or misunderstandings of things. And that's why we ask for it gradually and when we are ready, right? So we say, give me the filters first, but eventually I want to be unified with you fully, right?
So that answers my question. I heard Ben Yosef from David, and I immediately knew he was a Christian, because the only people who talk about Mashiach ben Yosef being rejected and obsess on that continuously are Christians. I just really quick sec. I know I don't want to derail this. I just wanted to educate real quick. Obadiah chapter 1 verse 18 says the role of Mashiach ben Yosef, and it is to destroy Edom. So if your Mashiach did not do that, then he is not Mashiach ben Yosef. So anyway.
Just
okay, cool.
Yehuda, we appreciate that. I was just going to say, generally speaking, we discussed the topic of Mashiach ben Yosef very openly over here. This is a brave space. There are many different interpretations. I mean, Mashiach ben Yosef could even be seen as Zionism, right? There's versions.
Right. Yeah, that's Rav Kook's perspective. Right.
Correct.
I'm saying, like, from the Tanakh, that is the most clear source. It says, out of Jacob a fire and Yosef a flame, house of Yosef a flame, and for Asa for stubble. So that is the most explicit, obvious reference to it. So if we're talking about it according to its plain meaning, that is the role of Mashiach ben Yosef. Whoever you're claiming to be that, if they did not destroy Edom, they're not Mashiach ben Yosef, at least on any sort of viable level that would be, exegetically or historically sound. So that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah, no. I would understand that. I would like to use that as a bridge to what you were talking about before, because Hezi, I'm just wondering on your thoughts on this may seem unrelated at first, but the traditional interpretation is that Edom is related to Rome, and Rome as a representation of humanity, as Edom and Adam, Aleph Dalet Mem, as being could have an origin in a similar idea of a redemption of humanity. So as a goy, I'm just wondering the concept of justice, how Noahides or Christians or God-fearers in any way seeking after the God of Israel, when the law, righteousness, and justice as established in Torah is established through a relationship and that relationship being I'm the God who redeemed you out of Israel, right? That's the case law. How do Gentiles understand themselves, could understand a concept of justice if we are removed from the case law, right? Like where a judge develops the law based on a particular circumstance, and we see that as justice. But right now we're jumping into a situation where like God didn't redeem my people out of Egypt, right? So how do we understand?
I mean, I think he redeemed all people when he redeemed the Israelites out of Egypt, because it's a we have a universal message ultimately to give to the world, and I would say that when God ultimately calls Egypt my people and Assyria my handiwork.
But okay, please balance whatever you're about to say with the idea that I've been told that as a Gentile, it's not my law, right? I should not prevent myself.
Which one, the 613 or the Noahide laws?
Well, so yes, the Noahide laws, but what about the 613? Because I'm talking specifically about what God appeals to when he says, because I redeemed you out of Egypt.
Yeah, but
before you answer that, sorry. I have to go.
Right now? Because I wanted to finish this last
part. I have to go right now, yeah. Apologies.
Okay.
Work is
so let's do this. So first of all, Ben, thank you. I'm gonna continue this last portion just so we have it. Like, if you want to come back to this, you could see it just like the end portion of this blessing.
Yeah.
We'll go over it again, and then we're happen to be talking about justice and righteousness right now in this last verse, David. So let's get into that, and then let's open up your question again.
Yeah, sorry for disturbing. Thank you, and thank you, David.
No. You're great, dude. So we say over here, V'tzadkenu b'mishpat, baruch ata Hashem, ohev tzedakah mishpat. He left, right? So we're saying that vindicate us through righteousness and justice. So ultimately, right, there is I would say in the conclusion over here, what we're asking about this tzadkenu b'tzedek u'b'mishpat, in this righteousness and justice, we're asking for two of these things. I want God to appear in both of them, in justice, which is mishpat, and righteousness. And it's not just a legal system that's going to enforce rules, but I want a system that reveals the idea of justice itself, right? So again, there's a tension in justice, in mishpat. It's a strict law, and ideally there's an objective truth, and there's din, right? There's judgment. And in tzedakah, which is righteousness or kindness, again, there's compassion and there's mercy, and there's going lifnim mishurat hadin, going beyond the law, right? So this is a problem in most systems, because the legal could usually be one or the other, right? I could be strict justice and I'm going to lack compassion, or I'm going to have compassion and I'm going to compromise on the truth. Now, what the Jewish ideal is, right? And this is, I think, one of our biggest gifts to the world, is an idea from Rav Kook, which is Ichud Hamidot, or Ichud HaFachim, which would be the unification of opposites, of the unification of attributes. Meaning, I want justice and righteousness, the Kal Mishpat, to operate simultaneously. And this is really what would define the Jewish legal ideal. And the idea would be that in the courtroom, where we say in Psalms, Elohim Nitzav be'adat Elohim be'kerev Elohim Mishpat, meaning that God is standing there and he will be the judge as well. God's presence is felt in the courtroom and within the act of his judgment, right? So, and how do we see this? Only when they're unified. Now, it was said about King David, and this is going to get back to your note, David. So you prophesied this, right? So that David was both of these things, right? You see this in 2 Samuel, that he gave justice and he was righteous to all his people. So again, how is he doing both? And the Talmud gives 3 answers to this. One is that there was post-judgment kindness, meaning David would judge strictly, and then he would pay the poor person out of his own money, right? So then we have tzedakah, but we didn't really get mishpat because it didn't happen simultaneously. Then there is a version that said, how did he do this? But it was compromise, which was like a middle solution, right? So there's some justice and there's some righteousness, but none of them are complete. The third option is really to transform justice. Meaning, how did this work? David ruled strictly according to the law, but the guilty person, David, he felt it as kindness. Why? Because he was saved from sin and he restored his morality, right? He knew I sinned. He knows I made a mistake. So it's like you were saying about Achan. Ultimately, he admits and he understands this is happening. So justice that is experienced ultimately as kindness. If you understand and you're oriented properly, both of these could be done, right? So we also have to understand the word tzedakah, right? In Hebrew, it carries two things. It's the opposite of justice. It means kindness and mercy, or it's the opposite of chesed, because it can mean also tzedek, which means justice. And again, this is sort of in Kabbalistic terms, this is the tzedakah is the bridge between din and chesed, which is again grace and judgment. And again, the first time we see our father Abraham Avinu, right? He says, why does God choose him? Because he says, you will, I see you're going to tell your children, right? You are going to be having your kids doing these specific things. And God, remember, God is searching around. There's Noah, there's Enoch, there's other cool dudes out there. But finally, he finds someone that is going to promulgate these ideas on, right? We even see with Job, right? He has to give this every day. He has to give this blessing because his kids are having parties all the time. They're not connected. He's feeling nervous about this. He knows it didn't work on. It didn't go on to the next state, to the next generation. Abraham wants to push this further. This is the mission of Abraham. This is ultimately the foundation of Israel, and that really is the vision of what Judaism wants. Right? I'm not choosing between opposites. I'm trying to integrate them. And this is also what we want for the ideal society. I don't want justice that's going to eliminate compassion, and I don't want compassion that's going to distort truth. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, recently, Chezi, I had to skip a week for Bible study, and it was because I was being called to be a character witness for a friend who had accusations against him. Nice. And I really appreciate, I was one of the only people who had to get on the stand because the person pled guilty, but they still, for sentencing purposes, brought me in as a character witness. Okay, so I'm on the stand, and the prosecutor is challenging everything I say, right? And it's essentially his job to be a jerk to me, to doubt everything that I say, even if it sounds
your name David?
Yes, exactly. He pushed me on everything. And they call for recess afterwards. And I wanted to walk up to the prosecutor and shake his hand and thank him. And I think ultimately it actually turned out better for the person that I was the character witness for because of this. I think it backfired a little bit, but I didn't realize that right after. I thought it was just very painful for me while up there, while someone is attacking you over and over again. But at the end of that process, I didn't think to myself, I hate this guy. Why are you attacking me? Why don't you trust when I say what is true, that it's true? Instead, at the end, I'm actually thankful for that process that I can say what was brought forward was verified, that we know it's truly true because of the system of justice that came forward, right? Like that system, even when I'm on the side of the defense, am glad that such an event occurred. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And now, if that's happening with people being mindful and oriented by the Torah, right? Again, that doesn't mean we can't be aware of other systems that work, right? Like it says, when we come back to the land, we look at the nations around us, the system that works, right? It could be a monarchy, it could be some other thing, it could be democracy. We're taking on certain elements. However, the undergirding elements that is empowering those systems ultimately have to be from Hashem. And then if I could see that, like we said, mirrored through the judge, through the prosecutor, through that whole system, then that is a beautiful sight to see. And then, like you said, Achan or you ultimately being like, even though it seemed very harsh, I walk out feeling that this was true justice. And that is really the ending of the blessing. That is what we're asking for. And that's where we'll know when God is there, when two of these things could be happening simultaneously. Now,
do you think, sorry, I just want to bring it back to this. So everyone talks about how, the early American forefathers, that they quoted Philo, like they quoted all these philosophers, they quoted Plato, they didn't quote anyone as much as they quoted Deuteronomy, right?
They wanted Hebrew to be the language. They're
Right,
saying,
right.
like, yeah. I mean,
Right,
there were
so-
many of them were deists, but like they knew what was down. I mean,
Is that appropriate for Gentiles to do? To say this is God's sense of justice, and it's not just his sense of justice and righteousness for Israel. It is the pattern of conduct for all human beings.
oh, for sure. I mean, I very much see the Declaration of Independence is its own little mini version of, like, Mount Sinai, in obviously very different, but like this might sound like very patronizing, but like for Jews, it was sort of like, thank God, like it's about time. You know what I mean? Like for society to get to that point, even as like, I mean, this, you read, we were teaching the ethics of the fathers a few years ago. We were doing that series, and definitely the first two, maybe even the third chapter, Jesus is clearly aware of these teachings. And you think like it takes like 2,000 years to then people be teaching this like on a, selling like a mindfulness app or doing a YouTube, cleanse of it, telling you how to live when these truths were already, around us for such a long time. So as society progresses, of course, and that's like the Rambam says about Christianity and Islam, right? These ideas that are creating, path makers for the Messiah. The world itself is all slowly but surely being elevated. And I would say you're getting to this crazy Kairos moment where we're living in you remember there's been like the third assassination attempt about Donald Trump, and it's already old news, right? Like time has been accelerated. Israel being the focus. I love it. There's beautiful anti-Semitism out there. Which
Israel being the focus, I wanted to just piggyback off of what David said about like Gentiles and not having Torah like the same way in that sense. And something that's beautiful that I see about Israel being the focus is it says, in Zechariah chapter 12, which I believe this relates to what you were talking about, Chazi, about Mashiach ben Yosef, and how Rav Kook's idea was that it has this like Zionism idea of, and that's all centered around Zechariah chapter 12 and 14, where it says all of the nations will come and attack Yerushalayim. And it says that, there's going to be some calamities, and a lot of Jews, unfortunately, will perish in this. And also Gentiles, unfortunately, will perish. But it says at the end of the war, it says all of the nations who came up against the Jews in Jerusalem, because it says the Jews are going to be saved first.
That will celebrate Sukkot.
Right? We'll celebrate Sukkot. So that's a foray into Torah that unites both of the Goyim and the Jews, because it says in Zechariah chapter 8 that the Gentiles will come to Jerusalem, and it says that they will grab onto the skirt of a Jewish man saying, "We have heard that God is with you."
I thought it was the Talith. I thought it was the Talith.
Well, sure, but I mean, like, that's the implication. It's the corner, right? Yeah. So the assumption is that it's
But this is also, we see this in Zephaniah as well, right? All of us speaking in one accord in pure speech, right? The rectification of Babel. But I would say something else, and this is going to sound like more, maybe more liberal. But the prophets, there's different versions between Ezekiel's end of days and Isaiah's end of days. And again, I like thinking about these things as like a multiverse or timelines, right? It really depends where we are aligned and where we're at. There are different options that could happen. It could be more bloody. It could be less bloody. We are in the age of refinement right now. And based on the decisions that people are making and how people are acting, and again, that's why the whole conversation in the TLC and in the, like, seeing David and seeing Sam and seeing Paul and seeing all this conversation, to me, is beautiful, because of course I want my Christian brothers and sisters to, through their seeking, to start emerging closer and closer together. And over the years that we've been speaking, even though we have our disagreements, I still maintain that we are brothers. Like, we both can't be Israel, and we are brothers that are looking for each other in the field. And and in this beautiful process, like even with Father Stephen DeYoung, we are all getting to know more about each other while we each have our own claims. However, in the Jewish canon, right? As I wanna quote it if you don't mind. It is in Maimonides, Rambam, Shemitah, Lo Rak Shevet Levi. So this is important to realize that this is what's in our code. Okay. Not only the tribe of Levi, but any one of the inhabitants of the world whose spirit generously motivates him and he understands with his wisdom to set himself aside and stand before God to serve him and minister to him and to know God, proceeding justly as God made him, removing from his neck the yoke of many reckonings which people seek. He is sanctified as the Holy of Holies. God will be his portion and heritage forever and will provide what is sufficient for him in this world, like he provides for the priests and the Levites. And thus David declared, God is the lot of my portion. You are my cup. You support my lot. Blessed be the merciful one who provides assistance, right? So that is the blessing to anyone. Anyone that wants to dance with God is welcome to. Ktoshim to you, ki kadosh ani, right? Be holy for I am holy. The Jews, and this relates to the 613 and also to the 7 Noahide laws. We are all living together in one big house. We believe that we have the responsibility to clean the chimneys and allow for proper ventilation. Now, everyone else is welcome to breathe the same exact air and participate in that. That's it. That's what we're trying to model. So now there's a discussion in the Noahide community. Can I take on more than the 7? And the answer is yes, you can take on more than the 7. Now we could get into like, why are you doing this? What are you doing? How much can you take on, right? There's disagreements. Can you, according to, let's say, the rabbi I work with, you could take on the Sabbath. According to others, you can't, right? It's not a problem. The point is the invitation is really for everyone. And the invitation for God is for everyone. Now there's another sense, which is like, you don't necessarily need to take on things that might be cultural things that we have that are relevant for us, because that dilutes the beautiful tapestry of this world, right? We are all chosen in our own sense, right? That allows to have this beautiful picture. I want the Noahide Christian, and I want the Muslim Noahide and the Buddhist Noahide all to, through that vision, to give me deeper understandings of God. Now, as Jewish people, we believe that we have a very strict understanding of what that relationship is. And we hope that there will be more clarification when that comes. But as the prophets say, a man will not have to teach his fellow man, right? There will be an understanding that is so clear where, I don't have to be doing this necessarily. But I do think that there is a place for you to participate, like Joseph and I spoke to you about, like even when you were participating with Afikoman and things like that. We want to dance with everyone. I don't know if that was too progressive for you, Yehuda.
No, I this might be too progressive for you. As you know, I work. I don't work. It's just a hobby to in dialogue with Christians, on certain ideas.
Uh-huh.
And one thing that Christians will constantly, and I have empathy for this, I really do, is they'll say like, why are you hiding this from us? Why are you keeping it to yourselves? Why aren't you spreading it and being a light to the nations like it says you're supposed to be? So my answer is not, I've shifted my answer from, what your local Aish rabbi and even Chabad rabbi will say, Judaism discourages conversion and blah, blah, blah. I don't say that. I say, look, if you want to convert, find your local Orthodox rabbi and convert. I'm not stopping you. Here's your invitation. I haven't really gotten any takers on it, but like, I can't in good faith sit here and go, no, just be a Nochai, don't become Jewish. Like, I can't do that because
it could be both, because I agree with you.
It could be both. I agree. I'm just saying that, like, for the sake of argument, it comes up a lot. Is if a Christian approaches me in that way, I'm not going to say become a Noahide. I'm going to say, I understand your pain. If you want to become a Jew, become a Jew. I encourage you to become a Jew.
Right, but I think that sometimes happens because there's still a confusion thinking that like if I become a Jew, there's like extra brownie points or there's more salvations. That's why I just read this thing about the Maimonides, which is like the Gentile could get to the Holy of Holies. He gets to a super high level. Like you could do it. You don't have to become Jewish. I agree with you that like if you want to do it, I don't think the age of discouraging is necessary anymore. Like if you want to dance,
right, exactly. That's what I'm pushing back against. Is I get very annoyed when people will say Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. I don't care if that's the way it's been for the past, whatever millennium. But prior to that, Judaism was like there's no halacha that says Judaism is forbidden to proselytize. It doesn't say that. It's more like a hush hush. Because of anti-Semitism, it became that, and we stopped.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to. Yeah.
This was part of the conversation that I was having with Chezi about Passover, is that it specifically says what the laws are for the Gentiles who are participating. Why is that there if there's no concern for the nations whatsoever?
Oh, you're talking about when the temple was standing and when there were Gentiles present in the kingdom?
Just in Exodus, when it's stating it says what the requirements are, including for the Gentiles who want to practice it with you.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's a
also stress that in the redemption texts, but also in the 5 books themselves. The foreigner living in your land is that's not like a less than ideal status. That is the reality, which is like there is never a monolith, right? Like you want to have...
Also the image in Deuteronomy is that the nations around you will travel to you and say, this is the greatest law. Never has there been a nation where God has given such a great law. Right? Like that, that is what the founding of America, quoting Deuteronomy, is saying. It's saying never has there been such a nation as this.
There's a more radical verse, though, if you don't mind. I'll read it out to us. 1 second. And is it okay? The more radical verse is, first of all, no, wait 1 second. Where is it? First of all, in Kings 2, right? It says, those nations worship the Lord, but they also serve their idols. To this day, their children and their children's children do as their ancestors did, right? It's already talking about a reality over here, which is already more complex. And you also have, where is it? Sorry. Right. Okay. There's a verse in Micah, right, that talks about, in Ecclesiastes, it talks about through all the peoples walk each in the name of its God. We will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. And the commentary on this is that they go worship God, then they go back to their house, just like it was with Naaman, right? They go back and they worship their own God. There's an understanding over here. And again, I believe these things will be clarified later on. But there's an understanding where as a Jew, I have, again, a specific, the Muslim could have his Sharia and the Christian could have his Sharia, and I have a Sharia of 613. There are different ways also to understand and have interactions with God as well. And that's why I think it's fantastic. I don't know, David, are you aware of the prayer for the Jews by Pope John Paul II?
I believe I've read it before.
You know about this,
but
Yehuda?
It's been a while.
I don't think so. I only know about the Mark Twain quote.
The prayer of the Jews. Let me bring it up for us for a second. Now
I
I
think
was
it was
talking
called
about
"On the Jews." There's something. Do you know the Mark Twain? Everyone knows the Mark Twain quote, right?
but the land of Israel.
No, the one about the immortal Jew.
Yeah. That everyone disappeared and only the Jews left.
Right. Yeah, that's the only one.
Okay, here we go. This one. Where is this prayer? Okay. Okay. Are you ready for this, David?
I'm ready.
It's a pretty nuts thing. Okay. We are conscious today that many, many centuries of blindness have cloaked our eyes, so that we can no longer see the beauty of thy chosen people, nor recognize in their faces the features of our privileged brethren. We realize that the mark of Cain stands upon our foreheads. Across the centuries, our brother Abel has lain in the blood which we drew or shed, the tears we caused by forgetting thy love. Forgive us for the curse we falsely attached to their names as Jews. Forgive us for crucifying thee a second time in their flesh, for we knew not what we did.
That's very interesting. I connect Abel, like my reading of Genesis is that Abel and Joseph are connected. And what was
Joseph are connected, right? I think you and I spoke about this.
Yeah, because it's the pattern of the warring brothers that is begun with Cain and Abel is resolved in Joseph, where where
it's such a deep insight, David, because if it's not, it starts again. It's a problem with communication, right? It starts with Adam and Eve, and it goes down all the way to the brothers.
Yes, and I
only
think
gets resolved, like you said. Even when Jacob dies, the brothers bug out again. They're like, now that he's dead, he's gonna kill him. And he tells them like, no, it's all good. I love you guys.
Which happens in The Godfather. In The Godfather, right after Mama dies, then the brother that you said you forgave, you kill. Right? As soon as mom's dead.
He tells them it's all good. And only at that point is there even a reason to go into the book of Exodus. I mean, there's because if that's how we get there.
That's how we get there. That's the tradition of dipping the parsley. Is Joseph brings us into Egypt, right?
But that's the whole story of Genesis is just can we communicate properly? Can there be reconciliation? Can we?
Yes, Yes, I would say that, and that ultimately that reconciliation comes because they see the role that God played. It's you did intend this for evil, but God used it for good. So that seems to be the source of Joseph's ability to forgive him. And to me, that's the question that Genesis opens with, because you hear that a descendant of the woman, is going to destroy the descendant of the serpent, but they're both going to kill each other, right? Crushing of the head. But if a serpent attacks your heel, you're dead too, right? Like if a venomous serpent bites your heel, you're dead, right? So it's a fatal blow both ways. But then you immediately get Cain and Abel, where it seems that only the wicked one is victorious, right? And yes, there's a mark on Cain's head, right? But not as bad as the mark on Abel's, I'd say. So it's how do you move forward? And the answer is God uses everything to bring about his goodness in the world. That he uses the betrayal to bring about full redemption of all people.
So this is a very deep, famous teaching in the Talmud, right? About which is all that God does, he does for the good, right?
Yeah.
And we see that in various different stories, and that's obviously there's a very big tension with that. I've said this often. This is why we cover our eyes when we say the Shema, right? It's hard for us there's a cognitive dissonance between the God that creates cancer is also the God that redeems, right? So we sometimes need to cover our eyes from that. The mark of Cain in Hebrew is ot. Ot is also a letter. And there's a sense which is God is also letting him know while you are being dispersed, if you orient yourself properly, you could come back and be part of the sequence of letters. You can make it back, and goes back to, again, miscommunication with words, not understanding each other, that kind of frustration. Like you are not speaking and you are not communicating properly, you're being removed, right? But if and this also we see with back with Jacob and Joseph, right? Joseph goes to his dad, tells him, Dad, I'm also a Jedi. I'm also having visions. And
easy, buddy, easy.
But basically, listen, I had visions. Granddad had visions. It shouldn't be a surprise. But instead, he says he kept it to himself, and he tells him, like, slow your roll, right? Like, and young Padawan, like, you don't know how to use the Force yet, if that's like sort of what you're interpreting. But again,
this is a question I have. Is Shemesh as the sun? He sees the sun, the moon, and the stars. I think the bowing down of the sun, the moon, and 12 stars. The sun is Pharaoh, isn't it?
Oh, also very deep. Now, generally it's seen as Jacob and his mother are bowing down to him. The question is, how his mother? She's dead. Does Jacob never bows down? But he sits up on the bed, and it's considered like as if he bowed down. However, if we look at this,
to me, it's Shamash and Chemosh bow down.
Right. So again, so there's that level of it, like just seeing like Ra, the sun god, and there's also reference to Ra in the Bible itself, where there's a hint. It literally says Ra, but you could interpret it also meaning the sun god. However,
you mean the word for wicked, like, or evil, like, or bad?
Correct. Right. But then the commentary points out that this is also referencing Ra, as in the sun god. Ra.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so we see there's an issue with the early prophecies, right? They're all like, if we want to make them work, we got to squeeze them in. Like the dad's bowing down, it's not really the mom. However, we see the later prophecies, right? They work out like a glove. Exactly what he says is what happens. Now, the way he interprets his first prophecies are by people, right?
Mm-hmm.
The star and the moon are my siblings, and the wheat is my siblings, and that doesn't work out. The way he interprets in the as he gets older, right, as he's more seasoned, it's by time, it's by days or weeks or years. Now, if we take that formula and we copy paste it back on his prophecies, right? Yeah. So we're going to say, okay, it's 11 distinct. It's 11 years or 11 days or 11 months with 2 distinct years or days or months. So now let's look if we have any numbers in the Bible. It says how old Joseph is when he goes down to Egypt. He's 17, and then it says his age again when he is standing in front of all of Egypt, which is 13 years. 11 years in 11 years in total, 2 years of being in servitude. Those are 2 significant years. And then you can see the prophecy comes out completely, which is Pharaoh, Egypt, basically all of Egypt is bowing down to Joseph at that point. And the fact that he has the same dream twice also is sort of a hint even to Joseph himself that like your first interpretation is wrong. Yeah. It's not your siblings. Like, I'm going to give you another version of this, but we get hinted at this later on when he's 30 years old.
Well, and I'm wondering as well. I know this is my kind of pet project. I'm sorry if I derailed you at all. I'm trying to.
We finished. We did the prayer. Prayer.
To me, Yosef is unifies exactly those concepts of justice and mercy in his that it comes to a head in him, that as the person who is weighing things for Pharaoh and determining that he is a character of justice, and he offers this forgiveness to the brothers. If the figure of Joseph becomes a messianic figure, like, to me, this is unified perfectly in Joseph, and that David in Ishbosheth, how he takes care of the descendants of Saul, that are it's not Ishbosheth, Mephibosheth. Sorry. The way that he takes care of is almost in the same image that he's taking care of his enemies' children, and the bloodline of his children. How does David at all compare to this character? Because the only time he ever does anything that looks anywhere near as great, it looks like Joseph. How is David the more superior messianic figure than Joseph?
Because first of all, David is coming from the outside, number one, right? Through Ruth, right? There's a sense where you want to have this connection also coming from the outside as well. And Joseph is obviously part of...
But Joseph comes from Rachel. Rachel is not Leah. She's not buried.
No, yes,
in,
but she's...
in the tomb. She's also outside.
But she, sure, in that sense, but she's definitely from the tribe, right? There was an attempt with Dinah to go universal with the sister, but the two brothers messed that up. I would say
the funniest way possible, but yes,
right.
I challenge you to a fight in 2 days, and I've arranged for you to be circumcised right before.
Joseph ultimately realizes that, and definitely at that time, that the universal mission, and this is the tension also with Judah, already in Egypt, right? Which is the universal mission, and it doesn't ultimately work like at that time. I mean, Joseph says, "Remove my bones from Egypt." By the way, there's an interesting commentary about that. One of the reasons he wanted to remove is because he knew that if he stays there, he'll be venerated as a god, right? And he didn't want that to happen. Now, and we see this ultimately with Moses, right? When Moses kills the Egyptian.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought
and
you were
he
talking
buries
about,
him in the sand.
There's also the tradition that he says that's why we don't know where Moses is buried. That he says, don't let them know where I'm buried.
No, correct. Moses,
no, correct.
Me. Also, we don't know where Moses is buried. That's true. Yeah. Moses himself, though, when he leaves, right, he takes the bones out, but he himself, when he goes out to, there's a fierce disagreement between the sages. And both heavy hitters. When Moses goes out to see in his brother's suffering, who are his brothers? One sage says that his brothers are the Egyptians. One says his brothers are the Jews, right? He knows he's from the tribe of Levite. So for all intents and purposes, he is Hebrew royalty, right? They're not even subjugated to work. And he also knows, as far as the Pharaoh route, the Egyptian route, I'm the Prince of Egypt. He goes down to see what happens. The fight starts, and he says he looks this way and that, and he sees that there was no man, and he kills him and he buries him. He sees the universal project. It's not working over here. While Egypt is extremely theologically advanced, and that is why the mages have power. And that is why really the first nation that receives revelation is Egypt. The revelation they receive is in the form of the 10 plagues, right? If you are not balanced morally, revelation is devastating. The Jews, the Israelites, that prepare themselves before Sinai, then get to see God and he tells them, this is the same dude that was in Egypt. I'm the same guy that took you guys out. Now,
Kierkegaard added something to a common expression, which is the truth will set you free, but before it sets you free, it will make you miserable. Right? Like the revelation on its own, without the full context, it's just terrifying and horrible.
Correct.
Keep going.
Correct. And so that's why I think that when he buries the Egyptian, that's saying like this is over. We tried this with Abraham. He went down there and he left. And we tried it with Joseph, and it was a good attempt, and it didn't work. And now I tried it with Moses, and it's a fail. Now, does that mean that again, I've told you in the past, there's some literature that even says that Jesus, right, could have been a potential Josephite Messiah. However, it didn't work, and there was like an imbalance, and I believe I could even go as far as to believe that again, using Rabbi Kook, using Maimonides, and using others, saying that there's a prophetic element to Jesus, that there's a messenger element to Jesus, right? None of those bother my theology, except when, the God claims come in, or the, its centrality, basically, right? Even the resurrection itself doesn't really bother Jews because it's not uniquely, that doesn't get in the way. Now,
right, exactly. I think that's where the biggest divide is, because I think that's, according to the New Testament anyway, that's where everything rides on the resurrection. In Judaism, in the Torah, it says it doesn't matter what miracle. In Deuteronomy, it says that if a prophet comes to you and performs a miracle and then says, let us worship other gods who Israel has not known, then you are to reject that prophet, because the Lord your God is testing you. So the burden of proof would be on the Christian to prove that Israel worshipped Jesus at one point. Enter the great Jesus angel hunt, where every single anonymous angel in the Tanakh is deified for whatever reason. And there's no exegetical standard aside from the circular reasoning that before Abraham was I am means that every single anonymous angel in the Tanakh must be a pre-incarnate Jesus angel, which of course Jews are not going to accept, because it's flimsy theology. It doesn't have any real backing to it. And aside from the fact that we do not worship angels in the Tanakh, right? I don't care if Moses bowed down to an angel. It doesn't mean that he was worshiping the angel of the Lord, or that Joshua was bowing. That does not equate that. So that's where the theological divide is.
It says they worship the Lord while they're bowing down before a character who is not always even stated to be an angel, but interpreted later to be an angel.
What?
I was just saying, what does worship even mean?
Right. Well, there is no Hebrew word that exclusively means worship. It's always contextual. So if you have Deuteronomy 4, which says, don't worship me in any form, and it includes the form of a man, and angels take on the form of a man, then worshiping of an angel, even if it's the angel of the Lord, would be idolatry according to that.
It doesn't say because God doesn't have a form.
It says I didn't say that. Wait, just a second. I didn't say that God didn't have a form. You actually, I did not say that. It says, God says, you saw no form at Horeb when I spoke to you out of the fire. And then he says, do not make yourselves an image of any form, right? The moon, the sun, and the stars are included in that, as well as man and woman, right? It goes through the entirety of creation. So that means that any theoretical form, right? There's a reason why God did that, to say, do not worship any form, including man. So if somebody claims in a man form that they are God, according to Deuteronomy 4 and Deuteronomy 13, regardless of resurrection, we are to reject them as the God of Israel, because that's what God said.
First of all, let's just all agree that it's nuts that there's a verse that says, because I'm going to test you, right? You could be like, well, you could not test me, right?
That'd be nice.
Yeah. I mean, Baruch Hashem, most Jews have passed that test. Most Jews really have passed that test.
I think, again, we always have to remember the context of Balaam, right? The prophet. Like, there's other stories and there's other powers, right? Darth Vader exists. Mm-hmm. There's ideas. It's something like we have to realize we're not the only story in town while we have our own direction, right? So we're not to be confused that like miraculous things or impressive things aren't out there. I would also say, David, that again, there's an idea of Rabbi Yaakov Emden also that talks about like Jesus, but it's a more general understanding of like also, and this goes towards like Sam and Unitarians. Like, what is Jesus's actual claim, right? Is he actually saying he's God? Like, once you're in that world already, then the Jews and Christians are like, it's like the divide gets smaller and smaller. But I also, when I hear Luke speak, right, I'm like, yeah, the Jesus you believe in, like, I don't really have such an issue with that, because like, I don't like, it's so, it's so abstract. It's so everything and nothing. So like, again, and once that starts happening, you're getting to, let's say, why our rabbis see, let's say, in the Hindu religion, it's also not an issue, because ultimately it all goes back to Brahman, and ultimately it's all one. So, at that point, that's all we're looking for, right? That unification could find itself in different flavors. And Jews and Christians, again, Yehuda, I know that you conduct yourself a little differently, and also depends like sort of in what context it is. Like in at least like
no,
this.
I get that too, because in this conversation, look, I have not brought up Jesus as God. What I would bring up is Jesus as the one who brought Deuteronomy to the Gentiles.
Sure.
Okay? Because the reason why my descendants stopped killing infants is because their conviction in Jesus as the Messiah read Deuteronomy and were told that's unacceptable.
As Maimonides quotes, it's
right. Maimonides says the same thing about Islam. Like he says that these were obviously,
but Islam did not bring Deuteronomy because Islam believes that Deuteronomy is blasphemy.
Which version?
Sure, yeah, it brought different elements, but it brought monotheism.
They don't believe God is Redeemer.
Yeah, but one second.
They think and Deuteronomy says that God is a father.
Right, but you need to be fair, let's say, in Islam, and this is a lot what I do when I'm speaking to my Muslim brothers and sisters, right? Like, there is enough verses and enough interpretations where you could, just like the Christians and the Jews did with their theology, right? Reform it while maintaining its divinity and its holiness, right? Like, we still have traditions how to do that. You guys stopped doing that for like hundreds and like 500 years. You're not doing it. So you need to realize where in your verses and in your text, there's plenty of of verses which allow you to build a narrative, which allows you to dance along with us while remaining Ishmael. This becomes political. I think as Israelis, I think as Jews, but specifically also as Israelis, we have the responsibility to assist Ishmael back into the tent. It's a very, very hard conversation to have, obviously. But,
but this is something that I've been just thinking about myself. Is God is referred to in Torah both as a master, God is master, but also he is a father, right? Both images exist there. And you could say that Christianity overemphasizes that human beings are the child. Though Jesus also says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," right? Like the servant imagery is there. But in Islam, it is only the servant imagery. The highest relationship we have with God is between a slave and a master. And to say that anyone is a child of Allah is the worst possible sin imaginable. Well, right. So God is not the Redeemer in Islam because the highest relationship is as a slave.
Well, it is like people unfortunately like to say Islam means like salam means peace. Islam means submission. Yeah. Right. And that's how you get the monotheism of the Muslim is there is room for nothing else because God is everything. Right. And in Judaism, the idea is God is everything, and it needs to be activated through human, right? To, as it says, right? That you sustain everything. But our job is to, it's a co-creation process, right? And we speak about this often in the Quran. God gives Adam all the animal names, and in the Tanakh, God waits and sees in a crazy verse where he says, like, as if he's talking to other angels, let's see what Adam will call these animals. And God is always waiting to see what we are doing and how we are behaving. But on that note, gentlemen, I bid you adieu.
I know I got to go too.
I hope you
Good evening to you.
Shalom Aleichem.
Yehuda.
Don't forget to daven mincha.
I would just say, Yehuda, and I'm sure you know this from Jacob. Here, it's less like, I mean, even though Jacob is pretty intense about like debating Christians, I'm in the mood right now of being just like, if your own version of Hashem, just go to church, be a good person, do your thing. When the day comes, who are we to say no to the Mashiach, whoever he is, whether it's the last Mahdi or it's our main man? We, of course.
Are you FFB? Just real quick. Are you FFB?
I am.
So I'm Bol Tshuva, so I have a bone to pick, okay? I went to college. I had missionaries knocking on my door. Like, I have a different hashkafa.
I got you. But dude, be optimistic. Redemption is around the corner.
That's why I got my channel. I'm spreading the truth of Torah. taking down Dr. Brown. Hold them.
Dr. Brown.
You can. Yeah. Never mind.
I know. Dr. Brown isn't what he used to be.
Yeah.
Hashem for that.
You don't need to take down someone who can.
Well, that was how it
take down
started.
himself.
How it started, take down Dr. Brown. How it ended, well, how it is now, it's basically taking down Ash Mays and whatever, whoever the Pastor Eduardo, whoever.
wanted me to talk to Ashmi. What's his name? Pete.
Ash Mays is just the reincarnation of Dr. Brown in the same generation, basically. It's just another one. Like, people always say, like, why do you do this, Yehuda? Why do you waste your time? I'm like, because Ash Mays. Like, I've been doing this for over a decade, and people, like, kept saying, like, why do you do it? Why do you care so much about Jews not converting to Christianity? It's not a problem. And then you see this former Chabadnik guy making a channel that blows up in, like, a week, because people eat it up.
Does he give convincing arguments?
No, but he parrots arguments from Dr. Brown. What makes him dangerous is he'll quote from Targum, he'll quote from like ancient Jewish sources, distort them, and try to say that the rabbis believed in a divine Messiah. The two powers in heaven nonsense, like that sort of thing. Like just taking a heretical idea that the Talmud acknowledges. So the way I deal with it is I just say, if you're going to take the Talmud out of context, then I'll just say John 14:28, the Father is greater than I. Oh no, you took that out of context. I'll tell you what it really means. And I'm like, you realize you just did that with the Talmud. You can quote from the
how well versed is he though in Mishnah and Talmud?
I'm gonna leave now.
Well enough to be dangerous, because he, whatever. Like, you could probably point holes in his. I wasn't yeshiva trained formally. I'm a Baal Tshuva, a little bit DIY, but like,
where do you live?
I live in the East Coast now. I grew up in the Midwest.
Oh, dude. Yalla, come home. Return to the land of your soul.
Oh, you're in Israel? Okay.
I mean, I don't know. This is where God told me to, like, this is where he said we got to manifest. So I'm just doing what I'm told.
I did have a question, but it was not related to this. So.
What's
was
up?
That? I was just going to say I did have a question, but it was not about what you guys were talking about. So I'll save it for next time.
I heard that Judaism Kabbalah is actually alien worship.
Did Candace Owen say that?
Who knows? Listen, I'm very down for the aliens to come. I'm very interested to hear their side of the story. It'll be fascinating to hear what they have to say. You have to build your whole. Again, in what is it called? Not metamodernity, right? You want to be able to toggle. Yehuda Israel, have you built yourself a Jewish theological framework which allows you to accommodate aliens?
Techiyat Metim, I thought I made up my own sort of like thing where it would be awesome if like all of our deceased ancestors during like Techiyat Metim like ended up on like some very distant, far off planet, and their souls were like I just made this up, and then like
I mean there's sources about that you get gifted planets.
I know that's like Mormon stuff, but yeah, I'm not
even Judaism.
Oh, okay, interesting. I'm less Kabbalistically oriented. I'm very like whatever. I mean, I find it interesting, but I'm not whatever. I like to find sources for the things that I like. You'll find, like, when I talk about Mashiach ben Yosef, I don't go, well, the Rambam doesn't talk about him that much, but like, well, Rashi says this, I like to quote the pasuk, and then I say, look, I'm familiar with the pasuk.
Right, but the oral Torah has an extreme amount of weight. Right.
Of course, I believe in the oral Torah. I'm saying that because when I have conversations in the way that I do, if I enter a conversation with the oral Torah says, remember, when you're dealing with a Christian, they immediately like lose respect for your position. So what I found is when I have dialogues with Christians, I have to come at it at that angle, right? If I don't, then immediately they're going to, start quoting for internal. They're trying to poke holes in internal consistency. They don't trust the rabbis. So if I enter a conversation with a Christian saying, the Rambam says X, immediately the Christian is like either
Right.
checking,
Yeah,
they're trying to find a way to like, well, I know this other rabbi says this. It's a chess game. Is they're always thinking about that. But if I'm already like saying, look, I'm already using the Tanakh as the authority, I'm playing it backwards. I know the Mefarshim about the verses that I'm speaking about. So if I quote a verse and I say like, you know, Hosea 3 verse 5, where it says, you know, afterwards the children of Israel will return to the Lord their God and David their king at the end of days, I know that the Christian has to agree with me that that's about the Messiah, son of David. I also know that the verse explicitly shows that the Lord their God and David their king, the Messiah, who both Jews and Christians agree has to be the Messiah because that's the way the Messiah is defined, a Davidic king who will rule at the end of days, right? They have to agree. Then I say, well, isn't it interesting that it says David their king and not David their God, and that the Lord their God is mentioned separately, right? But I already know if they say like, but your rabbi said, I know what the rabbi said. Every single one of the Mefarshim says that Hosea 3 verse 5, that's about the Mashiach ben David. You go to Isaiah 53, the rabbis, some say it's the Messiah, some say it's this, but where's David? Where's the Messiah, you know, title given to this servant? It's called Israel. It's called, you know, Jacob. It is never referred to in the servant songs as David or even as a king. Did you know that? Did you ever make that observation? This is my own style of how I debate Christians, and I find a lot of success in it, and I also know their sources well enough.
What is success?
Success is being able to get to a point where we're able to find points of agreement between each other using the Tanakh on standards of messianic prophecy and showing the cognitive dissonance between, you know, basically bringing out cognitive dissonance in a Christian and recognizing we have an exegetical standard that is consistent while the New Testament is circular. It's, you know, as Tovia Singer commonly quotes that mashal of painting the target around the arrow and saying bullseye. That is Christianity in a nutshell. Whereas Judaism says the Mashiach is going to be a man who is descended from David, who will be a human, who will reunite the, you know, ingather the exiles and, you know, strongly associated with the third temple.
Who will have kids.
Right. If you, you know, yeah, right. So if you look at it from like, and I can quote psukim that would indicate that as well, right? If you're looking at, you know, in Isaiah 53, if you insist on, you know, I don't exclude a messianic interpretation. My also success is to show that, you know, the rabbinic ideas are consistent, more consistent relative to the New Testament ideas. That's my goal here, is that Gentiles have such or Christians specifically, have such a mistrust for rabbinic ideas. And my goal is to show by using psukim and say, like, for example, in Zechariah chapter 8, verse 19, it talks about the fast of the 5th and the fast of the 10th and the fast of the 7th and the fast of the 4th. And they will become days of joy and happiness in the future days. Do Christians, it's for the house of Judah, specifically the Jews. So I say to them, who is this verse about? Do you observe these fasts? No. They don't know what they are, right? They think they're something else. You know what they are, right? What are they?
But it's very foreign to them that, like, why is Jesus going into the temple and reading the Haftarah, right? This is something that they
you understand what I'm saying about Zechariah 8, verse 19. It's talking about Tisha B'Av. It's talking about the destruction of the temple and all of the fasts that were made, the fast of Tevig, the fast of Tammuz, the fast of Gedalia. And it's in a pasuk in Tanakh. Right? I used to think growing up that like Tisha B'Av was a rabbinic idea that was invented later, right, to commemorate the destruction of the temple in like the times of like Rabbi Akiva or something. When I saw it was a pasuk in Nach, I realized Christians read this verse when they're reading Zechariah, and they have no idea what it's about. Only rabbinic Jews who have kept these fast days, Tisha B'Av, can have anything. You realize that this verse comes right before Cool Kid Kirk. You know, when it says that the Gentiles will come and grab onto the skirt of a Jew, the tzitzit, right?
I've heard of that.
Right? That verse comes literally just like 3 or 4 verses after the verse I just quoted. And they both refer to the house of Judah, the Jews. So which Jews are they talking about? Christians who don't know what Tisha B'Av is? or rabbinic Jews who have been mourning and fasting for the past 2,000 years and beyond about it can only refer to us. That's my goal, is to show the kesher between Torah Shabbat Peh, Torah Shabbat Tzav, and how Christianity just got it wrong, and that we are the real Jews of the Torah, of the Tanakh, right? We're not, just a bunch of converts who came along. Like, there's so many layers to this now. I branched out. I use Zechariah 12 to prove Zionism, right? You talked about Mashiach ben Yosef and Rav Kook. Rav Kook quoted that in his eulogy to Theodor Herzl. And so many Yidden do not understand. They keep trying to defend Zionism, and they keep saying, bless those, God will bless those who bless you and curse those. And like, come on, just go to Zechariah 12. Look at the world coming up against Yerushalayim.
Have you read any of Rav Yehuda Leon Ashkenazi?
No.
I think you would benefit greatly. He has a very, very interesting and sophisticated understanding of Christianity, and I think you would enjoy his work. He's great. His name is Money too, but or his full name, that's his nickname, but his full name is Rav Yehuda Leon Ashkenazi, a student of Rabbi Kook. He is fantastical. Kirk.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask, do you have any? Do you like Rabbi Elijah Mossadegh, Ben Mossadegh, or something like that? I forgot his name, but the Italian rabbi. You know who I'm talking about?
Eliyahu ben Amozag.
Yes, yes. Are you a fan of him?
Is Yehuda Israel or am I?
You.
Yes, he's amazing. Yehuda, are you aware of Eliyahu ben Amozag?
No, I don't think so.
Also, definitely worthwhile reading if you're it will just first of all, there's a great book by Magid Publications. It's in English right now. It's called His Name is One.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great, it's a very, very it's a great read, and it arms you with a lot of information. Definitely, if you're in these circles. So I would definitely recommend picking up that book. And also, I don't know if you are aware of the series Pninei Halacha.
No.
So there's
the Faces of Halacha.
The Pearls of Halacha. And
okay. Penina. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
A rabbi named Rabbi Melamed, Eliezer Melamed. He has this whole series. It's a fantastic series. He just came out with 2 new ones a year or 2 ago on the commandments of faith. And in it, he has like a chapter all on Christianity, all on Islam, all on the Eastern religions, on Noahides, on seeing Christian and Noahides, all the different opinions. So there too is like a very, very strong.
I have a joke that I make, though, as I say that rabbis make the worst counter missionaries, aside from maybe, Tovia Singer and the, Jews for Judaism and whatever, because rabbis approach it from such a perspective where, once again, I don't think Jews know how Christians think, right? They're looking at it more from and I don't think Christians understand how Jews think. My goal is to really bridge that gap in understanding using the Tanakh. Into understanding the basics of it. I'm less interested in I hate debating the Trinity because it's like the Christian oral law. And I don't think like a lot of people think that the Trinity is if I debunk the Trinity, then I debunk everything. No, debunk Jesus being the Messiah and then everything falls apart. Debunk the idea that blood sacrifice is the only way to receive forgiveness of sins and atonement and salvation, and you've debunked the entirety of Christianity. That's very easy to do. People make debunking Christianity so much more complicated than it needs to be because they don't understand how Christians think. They think that the Trinity is everything, and yes, on one hand, they're correct, but they don't know the real pressure points because they never really read the New Testament in an honest way to try to understand the theology of it. Most Jews they don't even know that there's a new covenant mentioned in the Tanakh. They don't know that Yirmiyahu chapter 31. Right. They don't even know this. They think it's a Christian idea. But when you really understand what the Brit Hadashah is about, nothing about it connects with Jesus. All I have to do is ask them, what part of the new covenant did Jesus fulfill? They can't provide any tangible evidence that he fulfilled any part of it. They just say
This is
he initiated it.
Jacob's $5,000 challenge, right? He offers any Christian $5,000 if he tells him any.
Right. Or yeah. Like it's impossible for them to say that he fulfilled any part of it. They'll say that he initiated it, and they'll say they have a new heart. The problem is that there's nothing new about the heart that Judaism doesn't already offer in terms of a covenant of the heart. They'll say you have a covenant of the law, but we have a covenant of the heart. Well, if you read the Shema, like I do twice a day at the very least, right? Yes, these words that I command you these days shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them to your children. You know what is new about the new covenant? It says, no longer will one.
Unlike I will pull you by the hand like I did in Egypt. Now, right? I mean,
But here's what it says. It says, no longer will one have to teach his brother to know the Lord, for they will all know me from the least of them to the greatest of them. That is what is new, the mode of transmission. It says that
the
God will
knowledge
put
of God will spread over the world like water.
Because God will circumcise our hearts and the heart of our offspring, because it's mentioned in Devarim chapter 30, verse 6. The Nachmanides says this is the new covenant that Yirmiyahu speaks of, and he says that is because what's different? What? It says not that we will be teaching them to our offspring. It says Hashem will put the covenant, circumcise our hearts and the heart of our offspring. So Hashem will do it. But when does that happen? After the ingathering of the exiles, not before the destruction of the second temple, as the Christians would have you believe. So there's so many different ways to do this that Jews don't know about, and they just keep focusing on the Trinity, and it's like this treadmill of nonsense that we just need to bypass that. It's so much easier to take everything down at once.
I found that claiming that the miracles, miracles weren't, the prophecies weren't performed, plus not being impressed by the idea of resurrection, and even throwing a bone, quote unquote, and saying like, listen, like the fact that he could be a prophetic or even have, none of that shakes my theology. Usually that is discombobulating to them, and then we move on to like other topics. But again, my focus is a lot more about, like you said, I think at this day and age, both in Israel with our secular brothers and also in the world, we just need to teach beautiful, sweet honey Torah, and that's it.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, as you see, David was on this right now. I mean, obviously he has his own ideas, but like what I honestly think, if Hashem sees us participating and learning his wisdom and understanding him better, Dayenu.
I don't have an issue with it. What I will do is, if a Christian wants to learn Torah with me, I don't have a problem with it. The second, I perked up the second he said Ben Yosef. I didn't even see his Jesus, picture in the background. The second I heard him say Ben Yosef, I knew who I was dealing with. I knew it was a Christian, because I've done this for so long that there's certain buzzwords when they say fruits too many times, or they talk about like it's very easy for me to pick out just by like the language. I can, they talk about bageling. I can do the opposite on like a messianic. I can pick it out almost immediately. So the second he said that, I was like, no, but that's what I will call out. That's when I start when you start using a rabbinic concept, and because that's the meta. That is Dr. Michael Brown's. That's how he.
But again, like even the rabbis, to be fair, even the rabbis hint to. I mean, this is true also in the Baal Shem Tov and in the student of the Maharal. Also talk about, like, again, like I mentioned, Jesus being there was a potential there, potentially,
right,
according to these Shittot. Now, again, that is.
Oh, I apologize. I actually do have to duck out, but I'm
sorry.
Yeah.
Take care, guys. Be care.
Take care.
Shabbat shalom. Kirk, believe in yourself. והשיב זוכר הם שופטים בין אדם לחברו כבראשונה שהייתה מלאכת משפט ואצלך היועצים בדברים שבין אדם למקום כבתחילה. That is nice. Right.